Regina, Mater misericordiae, vita dulcedo, estes nostra salve.
The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Jesus told this parable. Can a blind person guide a blind person? Will not both fall into a pit? No, disciple is superior to the teacher, but when fully trained, every disciple will be like his teacher. Why do you notice the splinter in your brother's eye, but do not perceive the wooden beam in your own? How can you say to your brother, "Brother, let me remove that splinter from your eye," when you do not even notice the wooden beam in your own? You hypocrite, remove the wooden beam from your eye first. Then you will see clearly to remove the splinter in your brother's eye. A good tree does not bear rotten fruit, nor does a rotten tree bear good fruit, for every tree is known by its own fruit. For people do not pick figs from thorn bushes, nor do they gather grapes from brambles. A good person out of the store of his goodness in his heart produces good. But an evil person out of a store of evil produces evil. For from the fullness of the heart, the mouth speaks. The Gospel of the Lord. Our director of maintenance in the parish sent this over to me at the rectory yesterday. He said, "Father, I saw the gospel," and he said, "if you've got a beam in your eye, I have a tool for you. A little surgical device." There it is. What do we have to do to get a clear view? What are we willing to do to get a clear view? I am proud to be born as an American, but even more proud, by God's will, by His intention and His intentional creative power, I am above all a child of God and a citizen of heaven, as you are. And so, this child of God, this American, has some concerns about America. Because I'm patriotic, I care. Because I'm Catholic, I believe that the most patriotic thing I can do is to help revitalize America as one nation under God. And so what kind of nation do we have that proposes legislation to not afford the right of a newborn baby to live? What is that? Our Bishop, Peter Labashi, sent a memo to his priests earlier this week, asking us to bring all Catholics to an awareness of the current state of affairs in our beloved America. And I quote from him, "Earlier this week, the United States Senate failed to advance the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act, a bill that prohibits infanticide by ensuring that children born alive following an abortion procedure would receive the same degree of care to preserve their lives and health as would be given to other children born alive at the same gestational age. The Senate rejected a motion to advance this bill. This is demonic. This is infanticide. This is a mockery of even one of the titles of God Himself that we give. We say it in the Creed, He's the Lord, the giver of life. And so, when intrusions on life are made against us, it's an affront to God Himself, who gives life. Our bishop invites us to visit a Catholic website that has been put together for our diocese. It's called catholicnewhampshire.org/abortion. catholicnewhampshire.org/abortion. What is it? catholicnewhampshire.org/abortion. New Hampshire is spelled NH, right? catholicnh.org/abortion. There are some very interesting things on that website that will really surprise you. They will shock you. I don't want to get into all that now, because what I'm most intent on is to see what we can do in a productive manner. It seems like America has a huge log in its eye, doesn't it? Why do you notice the splinter in your brother's eye, but you do not perceive the wooden beam in your own? Imagine, as a country, we have the audacity to cry foul to human rights violations all over the world. And yet we are promoting, as a country, infanticide. The most vulnerable of human life is being held in contempt. However, we don't need a chainsaw. We need Lent. We don't need a chainsaw. We need Lent. And that's coming, isn't it? Lent is a time I want to propose to us as a parish to get the log out of our eye so we can see clearly. A time to become a better Catholic, living as a living presence of one God in one nation under God, so that all can see shining like lights in the world as you hold the word of life. One nation under God in one God. This is a year to look at Lent in a different way, I think, for us. It's not the time to go on a crash diet and call that Lent so you can fit into your bathing suit in another 2 months, or for your trip to Disney. It's a time for giving 40 days to serious, substantial reform in our Christian life. During this time also, there's a campaign going on that'll be celebrated this afternoon in the church called 40 Days for Life. What can be done to promote life issues? And so, during Lent, I personally want to, and I'm asking you to join me, root out the logs in my eyes. But I have tools that are the traditional tools of the church for this. Not a chainsaw. Prayer, fasting, almsgiving. In prayer, the Holy Mass needs to be returned to its primacy in our lives, especially our Sunday devotion. Statistics show that average Catholics think if they go to Mass at least once a month, they're fine. That's not according to the Ten Commandments, nor is it according to the teaching of our church, nor is it in accord with someone who wants to have a loving Father and a relationship with Him to see Him once a month as you feel like it. And even perhaps to look seriously at the possibility of going to daily Mass if you can. And at the very least, to begin to have a consciousness of a daily life of prayer. And one mistake that we often make when we look at prayer is we think that prayer is to make us feel good, or if prayer doesn't feel good, it's not prayer. Prayer is to bring us into a relationship with Christ and show Jesus that we appreciate and accept His sacrifice for us. And we show our acceptance of His sacrifice for us by presenting ourselves to Him in a loving act. This is what we call prayer. And so we meet Him in prayer. And we should be praying daily, especially when you look at the evil in the world and what assaults us every day through different types of media and even in the way that people behave today. We need to be prayerful so that we don't have to be taken in by what is assaulting us every day to hurt our relationship with God. That's why we pray. We have the Adoration Chapel. There are many devotional things that will be listed for you and made available during Lent. Time to pray. Fasting. Why do I fast? Don't raise your hands at this, but just think for a minute. How many of you have been mistakenly led by your emotions and cravings? And how many of us so easily give in to them without even thinking? See, we don't live intentionally. We live by being pulled by things that are driving us and manipulating us, mostly turning out in our emotions and our cravings, or what the Desert Fathers and the Church Fathers would call the passions. In fasting, I make a choice to say no to things. Fasting, like the church has a specific fast for Lent, that's in the bulletin. Those choices build a habit of choosing and making rational choices instead of being led and manipulated. Fasting is good for your psychology, it's good for your health, and it's good especially for your spiritual life, where we give in to the Spirit and not to the flesh. When I was thinking about this, I was reminded of something that happened between my parents. When my dad was engaged to my mom, my dad was not a smoker, didn't like smoking, and my mother was a cigarette smoker. She enjoyed having a cigarette with her and all her sisters. My dad said to her, "Annette, I'm not sure about the smoking stuff. It's the only issue I have here." My mom said, "Romy, I'm going to quit cigarettes if that's what I need to have you." She said, on one condition. She said, "I have to be able to have a cigarette with my sisters once in a while when we get together." My father was okay with that. So I grew up seeing a pack of Parliaments in the medicine cabinet for medicinal purposes only and nurturing family life. Wasn't often used, but it was there. In a sense, I saw that as a reminder of a love that my parents shared, an agreement they made, which was a great sacrifice for her. And so in love, I fast And my fasting puts me into a disposition to be able to say no to anger, to be able to say no to the complaining that anger solicits. If you think about that for a second, our complaining is somehow a vent to our anger most of the time. Now, how do I know this? Because I sit down and look at me. Okay? So I'm on the list. Gossip is another vent for anger, and yet we do it. In fasting, we learn not to be driven by our passions, but to allow ourselves to be moved by grace and drive passions away. And then we have almsgiving. Almsgiving is acts of mercy. It's not necessarily about financial giving, although that can be included. It's about acts of generous mercy. I become more aware of my brothers and sisters in the human community. And this is a place where life issues become extremely important to us. That we should be aware of the littlest and the youngest of age. As Jesus would say, let the children come to me and do not hinder them. And so this is the place in almsgiving where I look at generosity and love and cut out selfishness and self-centeredness. Loving my neighbor even when it's inconvenient. Changes made by grace and by the grace of God are going to bear a fruitful Lent to us. And this is where we become different as a patriotic community. Our Christianity stands out. Our Catholicism becomes evident as a sign that speaks to the world, that says we're going to follow a different drum to enhance patriotism in our country, because we believe in one God, the Father Almighty. It's a calling for us to be shining like lights in the world as we hold on to the word of life. You know, in 1776, a tree was planted in this land. What is the fruit of that tree looking like right now? And what are we going to do to help bring that soil and that tree to health? And please do not be discouraged, because as St. Paul reminds us this morning, therefore, my beloved brothers and sisters, be firm, steadfast, fully devoted to the work of the Lord, knowing that in the end, your labor is not in vain, because we look from Lent to Easter.
Regina Caeli, letare, alleluia, qui